Hello, world. I'm Jack, and welcome to English Speaking Studio.
I'm Lucy. So what are you waiting for? Let's dive in and make learning English an unforgettable journey.
Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into some seriously human stuff? We're talking apologies and forgiveness today.
Oh, yeah. Two sides of the same coin, right?
Totally. I mean, we've all been there, right? Sometimes it goes great, sometimes it's a disaster.
Exactly. So much to unpack there.
Yeah, so we're going to dig into a podcast episode called The Power of Apologies and Forgiveness, Healing, Growth, and Moving Forward.
Okay, love it.
See if we can figure out how to do both these things well, because it is tricky.
It is, it's fascinating. You know, we often think of apologies as just words.
Yeah.
Just quick, I'm sorry, to kind of smooth things over.
Or make it go away.
But psychologically, they go so much deeper than that.
So then what's the real deal with apologies? Why do they matter so much?
Well, think of it this way. A true apology, it's like emotional first aid.
Oh, okay.
It helps heal those wounds, hurt feelings, rebuilds trust that's been broken, and even tamps down anger. The podcast we're looking at lays out 5 key ingredients for an apology that really hits the mark.
5 ingredients. Okay, I'm ready. Give me the recipe.
All right, first up, you have to acknowledge that you messed up. No buts about it.
Yeah.
You own the mistake without trying to justify it. Then you've got to step into the other person's shoes, really grasp how they felt because of what you did.
Oh, empathy.
Empathy in
Okay.
action.
Got it.
So no more of that, I'm sorry you feel that way, kind of non-apology.
It makes it worse.
Exactly. Those just make things worse. Then comes taking responsibility for your actions. And if it's possible, offering to make things right in some way.
So like if you broke something, you offer to replace it. But what about situations where you can't actually fix the damage?
That's where the final ingredient comes in, committing to change your behavior.
Yeah.
It shows the other person you're taking it seriously and trying to prevent the same hurt from happening again. Like imagine a friend betrayed your trust by spilling a secret you told them.
Yeah.
A lousy apology would be, sorry, but you're overreacting. A real one would sound more like, I'm so sorry I betrayed your confidence. I understand how much that hurt you, and I'll never do that again.
Huge difference. One's just deflecting. The other one is actually owning the impact.
And studies have shown that receiving a genuine apology can actually lower stress hormones, improve cardiovascular health, and even strengthen the immune system.
Ooh, seriously. Apologies are like a health booster.
They are powerful.
I guess there's more to sorry than I thought.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, sometimes saying those words feels almost impossible.
Oh, absolutely.
Why is that?
Pride can rear its ugly head, or maybe it's fear of being rejected.
Right.
Some folks are terrified of guilt, and even cultural or gender norms can make it tough to be vulnerable.
I know for me, it's this weird mix of wanting to do the right thing, but also dreading that awkward conversation.
And that's where it gets tricky, because avoiding apologies, even when it feels easier in the moment, can actually snowball into more resentment and missed chances for growth.
So like ripping off the Band-Aid, even if it stings, is ultimately better for everyone.
Precisely. It's about stepping back and seeing the long-term benefits, both for the relationship and for your own personal development.
Yeah.
Okay. Ready to shift gears and tackle forgiveness.
Oh, yeah. I think there's so much confusion around forgiveness.
This is where things get really interesting.
Like a lot of people think forgiving someone means you're saying what they did was okay.
Right. That's a common misconception. But the podcast emphasizes that forgiving is actually an act of releasing those heavy burdens of resentment and anger that you're carrying.
Oh.
It's about finding peace for yourself, not for the other person.
So it's not about them getting off scot-free. It's about you reclaiming your own emotional well-being.
Exactly. And here's another key distinction. Forgiveness doesn't equal reconciliation or rebuilding trust. The podcast uses the example of a friend's betrayal. You can forgive them without continuing the friendship.
Right.
Letting go of the bitterness doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life.
So you're basically saying it's okay to forgive and move on, even if that means moving on without that person.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing your own peace and healing.
Okay, I'm starting to see how forgiveness is more like self-care than letting someone off the hook. But I have to be honest, from personal experience, forgiveness can be really tough, especially when you've been deeply hurt.
You're absolutely right. It's a process, and it can be a painful one. There are a few reasons why forgiveness is so hard.
I'm curious to hear those.
Well, first off, emotional wounds take time to heal. It's like physical injuries, they need time and care. Then there's that fear of being hurt again, which is totally understandable. And sometimes holding on to anger can feel strangely powerful, like it's the only thing protecting you.
I can relate to that. It's like if I let go of the anger, I'm letting them win or something.
Right. And if the other person hasn't even offered a sincere apology, well, that just makes it even harder to even consider forgiving them.
So it's this tangled web of emotions, legitimate fears, and maybe even a sense of justice that's tough to untangle.
Exactly. But here's where things get really interesting. The podcast highlights some research that shows holding on to that anger is actually more harmful to you than to the other person.
Wait, really? How so?
It impacts your mental and even physical health. Studies have linked unforgiveness to increased risks of depression, anxiety, heart disease, and even a weakened immune system.
Wow, so forgiveness isn't just some noble ideal. It's literally good for you.
Absolutely. It's about releasing yourself from the grip of negativity and reclaiming your well-being.
Okay, I'm definitely seeing both apologies and forgiveness in a whole new light now. But even knowing all this, actually putting it into practice is another story. How do we navigate these emotions effectively? How do we actually apologize well and forgive when it feels impossible?
Those are the million-dollar questions, and thankfully, the podcast offers some practical steps for both sides of the equation.
So we've got the why of apologies and forgiveness, but how do we actually do it? Hit me with those practical steps.
All right, let's start with apologies. Remember those 5 ingredients we talked about?
Yeah.
Well, the key is to weave them together authentically.
Okay.
Take responsibility without those pesky excuses. Show genuine empathy for how your actions impacted the other person, and if possible, offer to make amends.
I'm sensing a theme here. Sincerity seems to be at the heart of it all.
You got it. And one more crucial point, patience. Understand that the other person might need time to process their emotions, and that's okay. Don't pressure them to forgive you right away.
Makes sense. Pushing for forgiveness too soon can really backfire, right?
Right.
It can feel almost manipulative.
Exactly. Now, on the forgiveness side, the first step might surprise you.
Mm-hmm.
Allow yourself to feel the pain. Don't try to suppress those emotions. Let yourself fully experience them.
So acknowledging the hurt is actually part of the healing process.
Precisely. Then comes a really tough question. Is this relationship worth salvaging? Remember, forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to how they were before.
That's a great point. Sometimes walking away is the healthiest choice, even if you do forgive the person.
Exactly. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself, not necessarily giving them another chance. And finally, remember those boundaries we talked about.
Yeah.
Those are crucial, especially if you do decide to maintain the relationship.
Boundaries are like that protective shield,
Yeah.
right? They help prevent the same hurt from happening again. But all this sounds great in theory. What about those situations where someone just flat out refuses to apologize?
That's a tough one. And I know from personal experience, it can feel incredibly frustrating. You're left feeling unheard and disrespected, and it can make you question the entire relationship.
Yeah, it's like they're basically saying your feelings don't matter.
And that's where that self-care aspect of forgiveness comes in. Remember, you can't control their actions, only your own reactions.
So even if they never say sorry, I can still choose to forgive for my own well-being.
Absolutely. It might mean setting firm boundaries, distancing yourself from the person, or even ending the relationship altogether. It's about honoring your own needs and choosing peace, even if they aren't willing to meet you halfway.
I'm hearing a lot about the power of choice in this whole process. Like, it's not about waiting for the other person to do the right thing. It's about me taking control of my own healing.
Exactly. And speaking of tough situations, what about those times when the hurt is just so deep that forgiveness feels completely impossible? You know, like after betrayal or abuse.
I was just about to ask you about that. It feels like a totally different ballgame.
It is. When you've been through profound hurt, forgiveness can feel like climbing Mount Everest. And the podcast is very clear about this. There's no quick fix, no magic formula.
Right.
Healing from deep trauma takes time.
So trying to force forgiveness before you're ready could actually do more harm than good.
Exactly. It's about creating a safe space for healing to unfold at its own pace. And in those cases, professional help is absolutely crucial. Therapists specializing in trauma can provide invaluable support and guidance.
They can help you sort through all those tangled emotions and develop coping mechanisms, kind of like a guide through the wilderness.
That's a great analogy. They can also help you explore forgiveness in a way that feels safe and empowering rather than forced or premature. And alongside therapy, another key element is cultivating self-compassion.
I've heard that term a lot, but I'm not sure I fully understand it. What does self-compassion look like in this context?
It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a close friend going through something similar. Instead of beating yourself up for struggling to forgive you, acknowledge that you're hurting and allow yourself to feel those emotions without judgment.
So instead of adding guilt on top of the pain,
Yeah,
I give myself permission to be where I am.
precisely. It's like offering yourself a warm embrace instead of a cold shoulder. You recognize that healing takes time and that you're doing the best you can with what you've been through.
Like being your own best friend through the tough stuff. This all makes so much sense, but I have to wonder, are there ever situations where forgiveness just isn't possible? Or even healthy? Like what about situations of ongoing abuse?
That's a really important question, and one that the podcast doesn't shy away from. There are absolutely situations where prioritizing your safety and well-being might mean choosing to distance yourself from the person or situation, even if that means not forgiving.
So forgiveness isn't a blanket solution. It's about discernment and knowing when to protect yourself.
Absolutely. And in those complex and potentially dangerous situations, seeking professional guidance is even more critical. A therapist can help you assess the risks, develop healthy coping mechanisms, and even create a safety plan.
It sounds like there's this delicate balance between recognizing the potential healing power of forgiveness and understanding when it might not be the right or safe path.
Exactly. And that balance is unique to each individual and their circumstances. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
It's about tuning into your own intuition and what feels right for you in your specific situation.
You got it. And remember, healing is rarely a straight line. There might be times when you feel closer to forgiveness and other times when it feels miles away. It's okay to have those ups and downs.
So it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
It's about honoring your own process and being patient with yourself.
Beautifully put. Now, I think we need to shine a light on another aspect of forgiveness that often gets overlooked. Forgiving ourselves.
Well, that's a good one. It's so easy to get caught up in forgiving others that we forget to extend that same grace to ourselves. You know, it's funny, we're often so quick to offer compassion to others.
Yeah.
But when it comes to ourselves,
Mhm.
we can be our own worst critics.
It's so true. And forgiving ourselves can sometimes be even harder than forgiving someone else.
Yeah, why is that?
We tend to hold ourselves to these impossibly high standards, and when we mess up, we can be incredibly harsh.
Right.
It's like we forget we're human too.
So how do we even begin to untangle that? Where do we even start with forgiving ourselves?
Well, it starts with recognizing the mistake,
Okay.
owning it without those justifications or excuses we often fall back on.
Mhm.
Sound familiar?
Yeah.
It's like those steps for apologizing to someone else, but this time the apology is directed inward.
So no more sweeping things under the rug or pretending like they didn't happen?
Exactly. Shine a light on it.
Okay.
Acknowledge the impact of your actions both on yourself and on others.
Got it.
And then here comes the self-compassion piece. Offer yourself that same understanding you give to a friend who is feeling guilty or ashamed.
I think this is where I get stuck.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to be kind to others than to myself.
Mhm.
Any tips on how to actually do that?
Think about it this way. If a close friend came to you heartbroken over a mistake they made, what would you say to them?
Oh, man. I'd be showering them with support.
Right.
I'd remind them that they're a good person, that everyone makes mistakes, and that this one doesn't define them.
Exactly. And that's the same message you need to give yourself. Challenge that inner critic, that voice that's saying you're not good enough or that you're a failure.
It's loud, though.
Replace those thoughts with kindness and understanding. You're worthy of forgiveness even from yourself.
It's like learning to be your own cheerleader instead of your own bully. It's powerful stuff.
It is. And just like with other forms of forgiveness, forgiving yourself might also involve taking concrete steps to make things right. Maybe it's apologizing to someone you hurt. Maybe it's changing a behavior that's been causing harm.
So it's not just about feeling better on the inside. It's also about aligning your actions with your values.
Right. It's about moving forward with integrity and creating a sense of closure. And remember, it's a process. There might be setbacks, moments of self-doubt, but keep coming back to that self-compassion. You deserve it.
We've covered so much ground today, the psychology of apologies and forgiveness, how they impact our well-being, and the importance of those practical steps.
And we've seen that while it can be a messy, complicated journey, both apologies and forgiveness have the power to heal wounds, mend relationships, and even transform us from the inside out.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I can't help but think about all the different relationships in our lives. We've talked about romantic relationships, family dynamics, and even professional settings. It seems like apologies and forgiveness are universal languages in a way.
They really are, and they play out differently depending on the context, but at the heart of it all, they're about acknowledging the human experience, our capacity to hurt and be hurt, and our incredible potential for healing and growth.
It's like this reminder that we're all in this together, navigating the complexities of being human.
Beautifully put, and that brings us back to a question we touched on earlier. If you could go back and apologize to someone or forgive someone, who would it be and why?
Such a powerful prompt for reflection. I know I have a few people who come to mind.
Me too. It's an invitation to consider those missed opportunities, those moments where pride or fear held us back.
Yeah.
Maybe taking that step even now could bring a sense of peace or closure.
So to our listeners out there, I encourage you to sit with that question. Who would it be and why? What would it look like to offer that heartfelt apology or extend that long overdue forgiveness? Maybe that one act of courage is all it takes to shift something within you and create ripples of healing in your life and the lives of others.
It might be uncomfortable, it might be messy, but the rewards could be immeasurable.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of apologies and forgiveness. It's been real.
Until next time, remember to be kind to yourself and to others. The world needs more of that.